request Mr. Madhav Murli Mohan from Qualcomm to join us on stage. Mr. Vijaya Vivek Kamath from Sensorize, if he's there, request you to please join us stage. Mr. Jayanta Day from HFCL, if he's there on, I request him to join on stage. Then Mr. Vinod Kumar Sarma, request you to join on stage from VVDN. Our partner who will be moderating this session is Mr. Sameer Bhatnagar from KPMG. Welcome, sir. Request to join on stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel on Industry 4.0. Glad to have a very distinguished panel right next to me, and thank you so much for joining in. Vinod, you could come in the next year. I think Mr. Dave would not be joining us, so no problem. Thank you. We'll first start off with the keynote address by Dilip. So, Dilip, would you kindly do the honors and be the opening batsman and get the innings rolling?
Well, first of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, and that too to be talking about a topic which is very close to my heart, my organization's heart. So it's all about the industrial metamorphosis. We've decided to go without PowerPoint, so we'll keep it compact, and hopefully there'll be enough time for us to exchange ideas and take any questions that you might have. So a couple of things. First and foremost, we talk about Industry 4.0. That almost automatically means that there must have been an Industry 1, 2, and 3.0. Matter of fact, we are already talking about Industry 5.0. We are at the threshold of that transformation. One thing which differentiates this particular revolution from the preceding ones, right? 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, there's several things. But if there's one distinguishing feature, that is about the time constants involved. It took century-long time for us, for mankind to transition from Industry 1.0 to 2.0, several more decades to go from 2.0 to 3.0, a decade or a couple for the transition to 4.0, and just within less than a decade, we already are potentially living inside times which are defined as Industry 5.0, right? What's the point that I'm trying to make here? The point I'm trying to make is that the pace of disruption is increasing, and I don't see that trend as slowing down. So that's something which is a given. We got to start with that. All right, so to bring the conversation closer home, which is to our context here in India, there are a lot of things that are going on in India. Coming out of the pandemic, India really distinguished itself as, we were one of the most deeply impacted countries, but we staged a very strong comeback. No one really expected India to spring back as strongly as we did, but we did that, right? And now we are well accepted as the fastest growing large economy, right? We are already the 5th largest economy in the world, and people are already looking forward to India making the leap from the 5th largest to the 3rd largest, right? Now, all of that is very good. But if you really peel the layers, and if you look underneath of that, there are a lot of things that have to happen. We are 5 trillion, we are, let's say within a short time period of time away from being a 5 trillion strong economy. But there are a lot of people who believe that for India to imagine having a 5 trillion strong economy without having a trillion strong manufacturing, it's probably a pipe dream. We need to have a very robust manufacturing sector for a variety of different reasons, and I'll point to a couple, right? Now, if you're talking about a trillion strong manufacturing in a 5 trillion economy, that's 20%. Whereas for the last decade and a half, at a minimum, we've been struggling to get manufacturing to break out of the glass ceiling where it is stuck at right now, which is in the mid-teens of the GDP. Manufacturing is growing, don't get me wrong, but as a percent of GDP, it's not been able to grow out of the mid-teens, which is a problem, right? If you really look at Indian manufacturing is, the firms that collectively make up what we call as the Indian manufacturing sector is about, there's several tens of millions of companies. One estimate says there are about 60 million firms that actually make up the Indian manufacturing. A very high percent of those firms are MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises. If you look at the state of manufacturing, now we are talking about manufacturing going from being 15% of the economy to 20% of the economy in an economy which itself is going from 3.5 trillion to 5 trillion, you're talking about a transformation. You're talking about manufacturing which really has to double or beyond, right? At least the manufacturing part of it. And when you think in terms of the number of firms that have to collectively deliver that kind of an outstanding growth, it becomes suddenly quite daunting to imagine, would India be able to deliver that kind of a growth? Now, the times that we are living in, I spoke about the pace of transformation globally. We did not touch upon the fact what is leading to that kind of a change. And that change has actually become even more accentuated because of all the supply chain challenges, the geopolitical disturbances that have been going on, which is causing a huge disruption to supply chains and raw material availability. And then we have the entire skills issue, right? Are there enough people to staff that many manufacturing jobs that are needed, right? So suddenly you begin to realize that there is a high degree of complexity, a large number of firms, right? And all the changing times that are happening around us, and the fact that manufacturing actually is very global still, despite all the talk about regionalization, right? So with all of that complexity, can you really deliver the Indian manufacturing going from being about $450 billion to about $1 trillion strong in the near term, next 3 years or 5 years, thereabouts? Easier said than done, right? It's not an incremental affair. For this to happen, India has to undergo a transformation of sorts, right? And if India has to really deliver and live up to its potential, there has to be a transformation. And that transformation, the times that we are living in, has to be a digital-led transformation, which is what Industry 4.0 is all about. So I like the title of this particular panel, which is all about the industrial metamorphosis. Metamorphosis, just the sheer word, talks about the transformational nature of the change that needs to happen, right? Now, I said that times that we are living in, every part of our lives is getting transformed, and digital is playing a very core and central role in it. My submission to you is, though digital is playing a very core and pivotal role, it is not about digital alone. Digital is a mere means to an end. The end really is to deliver that transformation or those transformed businesses that can really, really grow several times faster than what their predecessors have, right? So hopefully you're all with me so far. Now, when we talk about industry undergoing this transformation, essentially what's going on, right? What is, if you double click on it, what does this transformation actually mean, right? There's several ways to describe this. And I'm just going to use the analogy and what many people refer to as the digital thread. In a digitally transformed firm, there is one version of truth that exists all around. There aren't interpretations and innuendos and my understanding versus someone else's understanding. If there's one way to describe what's going on across the business, and that reality is shared across the entire enterprise, no matter whether you are in the design side of the house or the engineering functions or the manufacturing activities or the downstream supply chain, distribution, what have you, services, right? What binds this entire organization together is what many people call as the digital thread, right? Why is this so important? A digital thread makes it possible for you to have an unprecedented visibility across your entire enterprise. The entire enterprise value chain thus is bound by a single thread that runs across, which gives that transparency in a very secure manner. And throughout this digital thread are multiple digital twins. Now that's a relatively new term, which people have taken a lot of fancy to. It sometimes can sound a little bit, what exactly is a digital twin, right? Is this something that is meant for me? Those of you who are attached or come from a manufacturing background, I'd like to remind you all, manufacturing or core industrial processes have been using modeling technologies for a long period of time, decades at a minimum, right? We model processes. Models were nothing but digital twins without using that name. It's just that now we have a multitude of digital twins, which are superior representations of the real thing. More importantly, a digital twin can actually tell you not only the state of that particular asset, like this thing in my hand, right? Not only at this point in time, but over its entire life cycle, which makes it much more feasible for you to simulate and emulate things around that, thus enabling your decision-making quality. And decision makers in an industrial setting are not only people who sit in boardrooms. A decision maker could be a line-side operator who has to take split-second decisions, which would sometimes lead to a good business outcome, but many times when they are not so well trained, could actually lead to some not so optimal outcomes, leading to plant outages, unplanned downtime, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you improve the quality of that decision making? Is by allowing them to run the digital twins, run simulations and that, sometimes practically by the side of the line itself, right? And thus making decisions with greater confidence, right? I'm just trying to oversimplify some of these concepts, but to drive home a point that it is possible for you to have a scenario which is a much improved state, but that requires you to think very differently. Which brings me to the last point. Digital transformation is a leadership challenge. You have to think about doing things in a very different way, right? And that requires you to undertake a lot of change, right? You have to let go of the way you've known things to work, right? And that's sometimes not very easy to do, to leave what is tried and tested and trusted. But if you stick with what you've been doing so far, then you're going to only produce results that you've produced so far, which cannot be those transformational results, right? So my last submission to you all is digital transformation is not about technology. It's actually about our ability to lead that transformation. It's a leadership challenge, right? And with that, I'll rest my case. I look forward to the conversation. And once again, thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Dilip, for that really rousing keynote. I think you gave a good overview of where we are in the industry and finally ending up with, you ended up with leadership, but that's where it all starts. I like that part of it. You brought the most important thing at the end, so that's good. I'll now move on to Madhav. I'll just start off with. So, when I look at all these solutions for industry transformation, right, and we're talking about how it's not about technology, and probably it's not about technology alone, right? But technology plays a core role into it, and the variety of technology. Hence, I look at a framework. When I look at something smart, I say, what do we just think when you talk about a smart person? Smart person is somebody who makes the right decisions, right? Or apparently the right decisions, if I say it. And is successful in whatever object. When I look at a smart organization, smart plant, for me, it's a system which is making better decisions, which you spoke about, and is typically a more successful decision, right? And that requires data and optimizing. And that's the broad framework that when we look at, especially when you look at a lot of infrastructure projects, the smart port, it's a smart airport, our framework talks about better decision making. And so I break it down into 4 components, which is core technologies. Then we talk about the solutioning, the platform. The third part is its business application. And then, of course, the change management around all of it. And the analytics platform, which sits at the core of better decision making. And also feedback loop, which finally allows you better decisions to actually get communicated field. So that's the 4 or 5 elements. And I'll just kind of keep our panel around exploring these 4 or 5 elements, right? So I'll first start with the core technology, and Madhav just would like to know that there's a variety of solutions out there, and we put them all in the vision here. So how should companies look at deciding what technology suits them? And there's a follow-up question, but I'll come a bit later in the panel. But how do companies look at what technology is suitable for them? And as Dilip mentioned, the starting point, that we're already in the middle of 5.0. By the time we do 5.0, we think it's 6.0, but actually 7.0 is already there. And the huge technology cost of upgrading technologies and obsolescence, and it's becoming faster and faster, right? And money is becoming more and more expensive or more fluent. So technology investments find that resistance of ROI. But yes, how do technologies identify which technology?
So if you think about it, there are 3 categories of technologies that are going to be required in the edge. And the first, so if you think about the 3 things, the first one is there has to be some compute on the edge. Now, this is not your traditional compute, right? Previously, it used to be just running some kind of a PC on the edge and you're good. But things are changing. For example, digital transformation could be making sure that the worker safety is happening, the worker is wearing the helmet. So on that one, you need a camera. You need to have some kind of processing of the camera. You need to have some kind of, and if it's audio, video, then there's audio required. So you need heterogeneous compute on the edge. So that's the first kind of core tech. The second kind of core technology you need on the edge is with AI. That's going to drive a lot of these things. You need to have some kind of AI engine or some inferencing that can be done. And the third one is you need some kind of a connectivity solution that takes all of these things, takes it back into the cloud, right? So combination of these three things are needed in the edge. Now the question is, what should you invest upon? Now that's the trillion dollar question, even in many cases. It depends upon the use case, right? If one of the main challenges you will talk about is why is adoption or what hinders adoption. It's all about the value, right? So based on the value that you're going to get out of a particular use case, that value in some sense determines what technology that goes into each one of these three buckets. If it is something low value, your connectivity could be as simple as Bluetooth. Your CPU could be your MCU even. You don't need anything more fancy than that. And you could just do it a simple, 320p camera and you're done, right? But if your value is much more life, safety and stuff, then this could be a whole multimodal, heterogeneous compute that can do 8K, 4K, whatever you want. You could have 5G private networks or 6G private networks as your connectivity. And your CPU could be like, server grade, even in some cases on the edge, right? So to answer your question, three categories of technologies. The specificity that you pick on depends on use case and depends upon the value the use case derives.
So thanks, Madhav. So that's on the financial, and you said it's the use case both from a utility as well as a thing which kind of helps you finally determine. But in an Indian context, a lot of technologies, patent, product developed outside India, right? Do you see any barriers for adopting these technologies in Indian conditions, and which is a very diverse operating condition? You've got dusty areas in the west, you've got hilly, moist areas in the north, you've got coastal humidity areas. So, so there's a variety of different weather and climatic operating conditions. I was talking to one such user who had installed smart cameras, to your example, and he said that the power surges in the area was destroying and burning my chips. And it takes time to get a replacement chip and the engineer to come down. And for that period, my smart camera isn't working. And when it's not working for 3 days, I cannot use my screen because it's an important feed, right? So something as simple as like power quality is affecting the use of my. So do you see some conditions, or like is that also been a barrier to adopt?
From that perspective, in terms of the infrastructure not being ready in some form, yes, it becomes a barrier. But then I would argue the other way around is when you think about the facts of the future, like you are going to be talking about building the required power from the beginning, right? Unless you have a brownfield that you're converting in some form. Like in fact, this morning I was reading that Google is for their 2030 servers, they're already investing on nuclear reactors now, right? So nuclear power. So my belief is, as it's part of the metamorphosis, right? The metamorphosis is you have to, as a big fact, at least if you start with the big industries, you have to be building this, considering for all of these things. But that being said, I'm pretty sure that Vinod can add more on how they can make very reliable devices that can work on all kind of environment.
Thanks, Madhav. Which brings me to a question. When you talk about large industries, again, I come back to a keynote speaker, and he touched upon the number of companies which comprise our industry. And you spoke in a number which probably didn't make sense to me in terms of number of zeros. But which brings me to talk about MSMEs, right? And I do agree that large organizations can invest in the infrastructure and the ecosystem. But Vijaya, switching to you, how do you see MSME picking up? Large organizations have budget, capability, people to the business case, the financial case comes to MSME, their ability to adopt solutions. What has been your experience in SME, and what do you think are their perspectives on adopting them, especially since they're a large part of an industrial sector, as Dilip rightly pointed out?
I think MSME is the buzzword. Everybody talks about MSME. And all MSMEs are really doing good jobs. They're trying to address issues in the industry with their solutions. I think the government has given a lot of incentives to MSMEs, and now MSMEs can also have IPOs and raise money. Okay? So I think that is an absolute great thing for MSME. Now, from a technology perspective, okay, I think if an MSME has a 3 to 5 year roadmap and vision, they are enough and more solution providers, cloud computing providers who provide solutions on the cloud. They are OPEX models, so there's no heavy CAPEX that MSMEs have invest in. So all these levers are available to MSMEs. So I think it's all about having the right vision by an MSME, trying to address a problem which has not been addressed by anybody, something new, and leveraging all these incentives that the government and large organizations such as Amazon, Microsoft, etc., giving via cloud computing, ready solutions, AI, ML solutions, which they can just adapt and implement. So I think there are tremendous opportunities for MSMEs to tap and grow in this.
Thank you, Vijay. Just a quick follow on. You see the advent of SaaS providers support MSMEs in the segment. Is that something that can SaaS providers, software as a service, technology as a service, industry 4.0 as a service? Is that something which you see as an important segment which should be promoted by either larger service providers, smaller startups, providers,
Yeah, absolutely.
where the capex gets converted into like an operating?
Yeah,
And-
absolutely. So there are two topics here. One is Industry 4.0, which is like the core business and the technology part. If you look at the other things like, HR systems, finance systems, etc. So I think that is where MSMEs have really benefited a lot from all the Zohos, Tallies, etc. of the world. Okay? So I think it's just a matter of time. And since Amazon, Microsoft, and all the large giants have opened their platform,
Right.
to technology startups, etc., who have such solutions implemented which MSME can consume.
Right.
So I feel that SaaS and OPEX models something which MSMEs can leverage and get deeper into industry.
Thanks, Vijaya. And we've talked about the transition of solution. Vinod, we'll come to you now. That and there are different generations of 4.0, a variety, as Vijay just mentioned. 4.0 is just core of it, but there are other technologies around it, digital, 3D printing, smart devices, etc., wearables, and they are at different generations. So how do you see all of these coming together? And a lot of companies have legacy systems, and there's a cost for it. And MSMEs, of course, they have a large organization. Historically, large organizations have developed a lot of in-house systems as well. So there are integration issues, there are solution issues. A single version of truth can flow data seamlessly from one to another. So how do you see this challenge emerging? And I think it's a big challenge when you talk about large organizations implementing it, whereas small organizations have a different challenge that they probably don't have some start off new. But large organizations, they have a lot of legacy systems. How do you see that challenge playing out in India, and how does that affecting industry? I'm basically the next generation.
Hello, good afternoon. So, I think very right. We have seen the manufacturing, traditional manufacturing to the mass production, then go to the batch production and the customized mass production now. Even your cell phone has a customized mass production because you can define your the wallpaper, what kind of apps has to be there. Even your car is a customized mass production. Yes, there are legacy systems. So you will have all the man, material, methods, or movement. If you consider 4 elements of any manufacturing, the machine has its own legacy system. The people are not connected. The material is not tracked from the entry to exit, end of the line. The movement is not tracked, which we are talking more from the traceability perspective. So See, the organization has to define, okay, which is my legacy system, okay, what kind of protocols they have to follow for the data transfer or for the analytics, okay, what kind of the critical processes you should have, whom you have to track. So surely each organization has its own way of manufacturing the things, but there are certain critical processes which they have to track. So there is a way to overcome all these challenges. Yes, there is a legacy system, there is a SAP is there, there is MES, SCADA. They're all not integrated. They're working by their own way. Need to understand where I am today as a edges process. Okay, what I am doing today. What is the business objective? What the organization is setting up as a ops side or as well as from the business side? Is my priority is the time to market? My priority is the design to cost, or my priority is the improving the efficiency? Depend on those elements, we need to decide, okay, right protocol. There is a lot of midwares where you have to connect the connectors from your MES system, from SAP or from your SCADA side to gain the more efficiency. So surely by doing some retrofit and all these things, you can get the data and transform the data. See, end of the day, the whatever we talk about the industry 4.0 or industry X.0, what Dilip was talking at 5.0. See, in the manufacturing, the only one thing is very important. Who am I? Whether as a material or as a machine or as a product. Who am I should be identified in the each stage of the manufacturing process. Whether you are talking the digital thread, you are connected, throwing the data, identifying who is this person and from where it is coming the element. This is what about, I would say, as a from the legacy side, how you are going to tackle.
Thanks, Vinod. So that I think gives me a clarity, at least somewhere. How do we look at the technology transition? Mentioned, identify something which meets the financial use case, the changing MSMEs, what service providers, legacy issues in adoption of technology standards coming in. I now move to the second stage and picking up from you, Vinod, again, right? You talk about data going from one part of the data chain, from one equipment to another, from man to machine, right? Um, but there might be point solutions. There could be organizations which offer end-to-end solutions, which has their own challenges in terms of being a monolithic solution. May not one size may not fit all, or too large to like operate, or kind of compute cost or fix. There are companies which take a choice of taking point solutions and getting somebody to integrate them. What do you see as the kind of solutions which could work in terms of a common, which could integrate some of these? So I'm now going to the solution space. So point solutions getting integrated versus monolithic solutions. How do you see the evolution happening in manufacturing comes to adopt?
Good.
And just as a context, I think manufacturing again, I think assets are hard. Long-term assets takes time to install a machine, get it operated, etc. Service industries are very different. They work on platforms now. Talk about banking, scaling. Faster assets, more asset light there, probably no fixed assets. That's really where the challenge I foresee and get point. Where do you see Indian manufacturing adopting solutions, platform solutions?
So surely, before that, just I'll give one more context here. See the type of organizations who are adopting this, right? First, it's very important to know like SMEs. Typically, the big organization, the big giants, has a the budget. They have a plan, but majority of the organizations who are going through the challenges are the SMEs, small and medium-sized organization. The reason because they want to compete, they want to survive, and
Right.
to be honest, the most of the innovations, if you see, they are coming from SME side
Okay.
because they have a challenge, they have a constraint, so they have to innovate. There is no other way. So they are doing that. A lot of policies, government is supporting us, okay, by the PLI program or the Make in India, Digital India. Definitely, there are a lot of the drives are coming from there. But when you talk about the point solution, so when you talk about the manufacturing industry, right, each organization you have to connect from A to B, from the raw material till the end of line, and till the customer experience. So surely the point solution will give you some kind of quick success. But if really you want to see the complete benefit or the business outcome of the industry 4.0 or digital transformation, you have to complete integrated digital transformation. The point solution, yes, will give you, but surely if you want to see the real output has to be integrated and completely lined in the process.
Vijay, any thoughts that you have on this point? How can we make these integrate better? Because there will be point solutions. There's a cost benefit which people do, and they like budgets are there. Okay, my CEO or CFO hasn't allowed me budgets beyond than this, so this year I'll only buy part A of the package, or well, let's just do automate this because this is Pareto basis. This is the big part of the problem. My bottleneck is here. Just do automation here and not at the so things like that, right? So how do you see what kind of solutions we need to look at so that point solutions or even startups and a lot of smaller companies are coming up with unique solutions, not address the entire, but may specific problem, but need to be part of a broader plant or a manufacturing.
So as a technology person, I've always believed that problems have to be complicated and solutions have to be. If the solutions are also complicated, then that's a problem. Okay. So if you just look at Industry 4.0, I can look at 5 technologies. You have AI, you have IoT, you have big data, you have cloud, you have robotics. So these are pretty much 5 levers, I can call it. Okay? So these 5 could, in all probability, 5 solution vendors. So while budget is a constraint, while adoption is a constraint, while changing the mindset of people, like Dilip mentioned, what got you here won't get you. So changing the mindset of people and people who are going to consume these systems is very important. So giving them solutions that work first time right, very, very. So you can break the entire problem into smaller processes. Okay, you can break it into smaller processes or smaller tasks, and you automate those. Show the benefit of those, and then that itself becomes a business case. So I think that is a very good approach. Rather than do a big bang, systems don't talk to each other, the users are left, data which they can do nothing about.
Right.
So that is the worst thing that can happen. To break the problem into smaller problems and to address one problem, I think that will help, and that might convince the CEO and CFO more budgets. That
Thanks, Vijay. I love. Oh yes, please, Madam. Please go ahead. It's an open panel.
So in addition to what you mentioned, the one other way of looking at it is, and what I mean by that is, for example, when you put say you're doing a video-based survey, like monitoring for a health, right? That's great. You put the whole end-to-end. Now you just have to change the AI model, and you can start using this for some other vision-based. Right? It could be for quality control. It could be for something else. So now what you have done is by using the same investment, now just by changing some AI models on it, you increase the number of use cases. So start looking for adjacencies, break it down into smaller groups that are adjacent or similar to each other, and then you start building much more value just one.
Sure. So I have 2 questions here, right?
Okay.
And both for you. I mean, coming from the larger corporates, right? It could be a personal view or not a personal view.
Everybody's a large corporate. So
Exactly. 2 of you at this stage, right? And then I will come to a leadership question. So people doing smaller solutions, right? And you've got large organizations which have their own approach, like I say, the entire platform and we provide it. How do you feel about solutions like these? Not as part of your, but like how do solution providers, and either you look at it, when people, like Vijay is suggesting, start small, do a small thing, grow the edge, versus saying, no, let's look at an entire solution. So what do you feel about what is a more better path? Nothing wrong, what do you better path?
Sure. Wow. No. So I'll make a general comment. First of all, we got to recognize Industry 4.0 is about the industry, and we got to make, as solution providers and technology companies, we got to make ourselves relevant to the scenarios that we present ourselves at, right? And you got to realize that There is going to be a lot of greenfield activity, meaning new builds going on, but 95 or 99% of the scenarios where you'll present yourself is going to be brownfield. There is something that is already existing there. Now, if you show up as, as a solution looking for a problem, chances are you're not going to find the ideal problem. You got to make yourselves relevant to the scenario that you're in, right? So that you can produce value out of the setting that you're in. Now, within that broader envelope, there is nothing wrong with having a point solution. A point solution is, there are frequently encountered challenges which are common across multiple industries, right? And I got something which is, just off the shelf, ready to go, ready to fire, and can give you results in a very short period of time. I think it's a very good approach for many settings, not every setting, right? But if you deploy it just simply saying that, hey, listen, this is a pill, just have it, and I don't care whether you have fever or headache or whatever else, it's going to cure you. It does not, right? So that's one thing which I wanted to just lay out, right? The other thing is, everything's got to be having the ability in this day and age to connect with everything else. If you're still producing data, right, which is good enough just for your system, and that data cannot be adding on to the enterprise's intelligence, then you are actually eroding value, not creating value. So those are a couple of comments. Madhav?
And you hit the nail on the head. So the example I would take is, Qualcomm recently we were with Aramco, and we created a bunch of industrial transformation. To your point, these are brownfield oil mills that have been in operation for 50 years and plus. But the good thing is the use cases, they're the same across all oil fields across all parts of the world. So once you have a fully packed, this gets simple replication across industry, across companies. That's one way of scaling very quickly that some of the big companies. And the second part, that in terms of how do you, there's still the barrier of price stuff, right? So the OpEx and the as a service model is one. But the other thing that we also started seeing in the market is a little bit of, because in some sense, some of the value is in many cases, and say, hey, there is going to be a benefit because of information, and the person sitting across the table is, yeah, I believe you, but I don't have the money today to give you because I haven't still
Show me the money,
benefited from it, right? So there is some kind of a value sharing in some form that also being discussed in certain areas, where we say, hey, what? Okay, if this is going to bring in so much value, we will share the risk with. We believe in this technology and with as we do. So to that extent, when value happens, some kind of, that's the other way, try to overcome cost challenge.
So I had another question, but I'll just come back to this very few thing, right? So when it comes about manufacturing, right, equipment, large equipment, be it mobile or fixed, and especially in GE, right, your earlier stated GE engines, they go on to a use as per pay model, right? A leasing model, right? You can buy a machine, use CNC. Even if when automation and technology becomes a large part of your plant capital, right? If probably 60% of the plant is not the cutting tool, but 60% is technology and everything, right? Are you seeing models around technology coming onto a leasing model kind of thing where the principal also provides you with the financing and that, hey, just like you take a vehicle with a lease and a finance, take my automation solution with the lease and finance. Is that some model which you're seeing also coming in the market or likely to come in the market?
We see that all parts of the region, but in fact, not even the provider of the technology. In many cases, there are independent third parties who would buy the equipment on your behalf, put it on their books, and then they would lease it out. Right? But again, do remember something, that every company has a different financial.
Absolutely.
Some people like high OpEx, some people like high CapEx. So it does, but the market is there for everybody, and there are interface.
Correct. Is I think just as a one policy thing which is happening is in the gift city, they've set up this whole leasing framework for aircraft leasing and ship leasing. If technology products, especially high-end technology products, huge automation centers, control centers and towers become, that's something which could be seen as a new segment of growth or leasing it out because there's some tax and financial benefits. Good. So I'll just, I think we have another few minutes, but I'll come back to this thing. So one of the things which I've seen is when we talk about these point solutions or instances, Dilip, right? And we talk about leadership. So I'll come to the last point on it is things take time to change. People need time to change. And these things mean that you'll first see a little bit of a benefit, as Vinod mentioned, unless you integrate end to end, have the data flow end to end, right? The complete set of benefits. So you've done point solution, you've got 10% benefit. You do a next point solution, it takes another 10% benefit. Third point, you get 10%. And when you do the third and the last, then when you get not just 10 plus 10 plus 10, you probably get a 40% benefit. Yeah, and then you get the exponential benefit where the entire chain is integrated, right? But it also requires patience because you're going to see the first thing become successful, then the second thing becomes successful, and then the third thing becomes successful, which is a journey. You can't do it like one night. What should management and leaders do when they're looking at designing such projects? And what kind of messages give to the team, which is typically brought from the production as well as the service provider, as well as from technology? What kind of lessons, message, and mentoring should leaders do to lead such projects? So these are long questions.
Yeah, I think first of all, it begins with having belief, right? It begins with, you cannot believe that Industry 4.0 or any transformation exercise is about that big shiny object that you saw. Okay, someone is operating their line with the help of a mobile device or an iPad kind of a thing. And let me also get that. It's not about that thing. It's about how they've reimagined the whole process of manufacturing and thus doing away with several other roadblocks that they could have encountered in a previous setting, which they don't have to now. But it requires you to have the appetite for thinking of things in a different way, right? So it's about reimagining. And then in that reimagined future, technology plays a much bigger role, right? But then the people, if you are a CXO, you're not going to go to the line and operate the line yourself. Your job is to enable your team, the people that is your organization, to perform their roles in a different setting, right? So you got to allow them to experiment with that technology. You got to demonstrate trust, right? Empower them, right? And then allow them to experiment, right? They got to become comfortable with that new way of doing things. And that requires you to have a little bit of that patience that you said. But at the same time, you got to yourself, first of all, show faith in the new way of doing things so that your team also feels that it's okay for them to take little risks, right? So, and all of this has got nothing to do with technology.
Exactly.
It's all about leadership. It's all about leading that change, right? So yeah, that's one way to look at it.
I think the ability to create a safe environment to experiment, I mean, that's that. And I just come to the last question. Since we talked about people, right? So there's a mindset change, but there's also a skills change. So, and I open this to the panel. I mean, all of you could answer that. What kind of skills and upskilling is required in the context? Have right engineers or we still struggle, as you mentioned. Do we have enough people for manufacturing? Probably not. Sometimes even when it comes to automation and fast, you got some bright young kid, maybe a 50-year-old who knows more about it than a 50-year-old engineer in your lab, who's innovative to do things, right? Knows how to fix things. At the same time, you need fast scaling. What kind of skills and what is the paucity of skills and capabilities in Indian context? I open to all three of you. If you can take a stab at it, and with that, I'll. Yeah, Madhav, please go first.
Okay. I have a slightly different opinion on that. I think if industrial transformation is done properly, there should not be any upskilling required, because the way and I'm not talking about the person building the technology. I'm talking about the person who's using the technology.
Okay.
For example, in India, there's a lot of migration that happens. So many regions, different languages. The way I would think about it is, if there is, say, somebody, say, Bihar, who goes in Karnataka, and with Gen AI, they're working with an industrial automation. You just go to the kiosk, he or she should be able to say in Hindi, and the response on whatever the question will come back in Hindi. And if somebody else comes from some other place, then Gen AI should be able to take care of all of those things. And by the way, these are not fancy machines. Even your phone can do these kind of things today, right? And to me, when I look at it from a skills perspective, yes, there is a normal technology creation
Adoption.
that happens, but then that's not where the main challenges are. There's
Okay.
like, to me, when you look at it from the other side of the technology user
Doctor.
and industrial adoption, like transformation on the shop floor and the retail floor, building enterprises, those kind of places, it should not have any upskilling.
Thanks. Vijaya and Vinod.
I think from a next generation perspective, okay, the youngsters, the trainees, whom we take fresh from college, I think if you have soft skills and those kind of training courses, for them to develop the right attitude, then the aptitude comes on its own.
Okay.
That's my belief. And I have with CS and I have worked with a lot of trainees, and we work on different projects.
Right.
And each one of them, if you coach them right,
Right.
they become skilled.
Okay.
That's my belief. And like Madhav said, when it comes to Industry 4.0, comes to those complicated, well-implemented systems, I think upskilling happens on its own.
Okay.
Okay, whoever has decided to have that line, we adapt.
Sure.
If anybody has decided that will not change, not the change, they all have those
Naysayers,
those
yes.
outliers, 20%. So I think organizations have to live.
Yeah.
So, I think Samir, very important because we are not going to replace the human, right? We are complementing the human being. This is what we are talking. Even the digitalization or digitization is not replacing. So the upskill is very critical here. Upskill could be what I think Vijaya said, yes, by its own, but there has to be ecosystem because the technician has to work in the digital environment. He has to see her, she has to see the dashboard, how the data is coming, interpret the data in the right way to, share the information to the next level or shop floor to the top floor level. So the upskill of the human technology upskill is very, very critical, and the ecosystem the organization has to create, and it's always top down and bottom up drive, and it's more from the individual's interest definitely, but surely there has to be ecosystem to cope up the changes or the accept the changes. The first thing as a human, we always resistance to change. The way I'm working, this is the only way of working. So the digital transformation will make certain disturbance in your way of working for the betterment. So yeah, that's very critical for the organization. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, Dilip, please go ahead.
Just to build on, I think we covered a lot of ground here, but I just wanted to bring in another different perspective, which is about, if you really look at it, just peep a little bit out into the future, the challenges that are facing us as mankind are pretty daunting, right? We don't have to overanalyze that. And if you bring that in the context, and just to build on the point that Madhav was making, we have to, at a furious pace, take over the kind of things which are mundane so that we can free up humans to do those things which machines cannot do. Because there's a whole lot of that kind of stuff. You can talk about decarbonization, sustainability, circular economy. These are just ideas. They have to be realized. Who's going to do that if you keep doing what you were doing yesterday? So, right? So machines have to take over that work so that humans can begin to do those kinds of things. And that means newer skills. That is very important. And so man and machine really has to work in tandem. That was the perspective I had.
Lovely perspective. Thanks, Dilip, for ending that on a high note. I don't know if I'm supposed to summarize. I've got a lot of good points here, but I'll just quickly run through them just for the benefit of our audience. So I think 95% of implementations would actually be in brownfield. So it brings the challenges with legacy systems and how do you kind of integrate it. I think we spoke about that. And then even if you're starting off on any solution, I think what was mentioned is start with probably a point solution rather than the whole in some of the settings. Demonstrate the value use case. So that's where the technology gets adopted, right? So do a small thing, show the value, and then let it success speak for itself, and then you grow towards adjacency. So I think that's the second sequence when you talk about solutions we're looking at. Core technology, as you said, is something to basically capture the data. AI is something to process it, and then a connectivity which send it back to the system, and you got an analytics. I think that's basic building block, and you basically choose a technology which works for that point solution. So the financial use case, right? And when you're implementing these solutions, try to get them first time right, so that brings belief, and especially for the MSME, would want to probably have budgets, scope, but have a hunger to become more technology efficient because that makes them more competitive. And in certain cases, makes them integrate into their principal's value chain, especially tier two suppliers, etc. It's a requirement that other supplier, the principal, wants to integrate into the supply chain and hence same level of innovation. The both market forces and competitiveness driving MSMEs adoption for technology, and for them, solution providers, service providers, financing solutions would be something take it up. And I think moving on to the last point is that yes, we need to have a vision, problem, address problem, and really have a complicated solution. So I like I love some of those lines and the scripts which came in. And as you ended your keynote, land on the same thing that it requires the right set of people, the right attitude, and a leader who experiment. So I think if you have to metamorphose, it's a big challenge. Looking at billions of dollars of a huge manufacturing sector, and I think it's on the leaders not expect big shiny objects, but yes, have a belief, longer term journey, and let. Thank you so much. It was an exciting panel. Thank you for sharing your views, especially Vinod. Extra thank for you with your injured foot to be here, and Vijaya, loved your voice today. It's nice and fine. And Bharat, thank you so much for flying all the way from across half the world, and Dilip for your brilliant keynote and a great enthusiastic speaker and being one of the best opening batsmen I've had. Thank you, everybody. Sorry? Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, sure. So that's a thank you from my side. The organizers have something to thank all of you for. So we've got a round of mementos. So, yes. Thank you.